Welcome to Leading from Inside Out, Stories of Courage and Leadership in Corrections. I'm Kathy Kenny. This podcast is sponsored by Securus Technologies in partnership with the Moss Group. In this podcast, we will offer a glimpse of what it is like to work behind the fence. We will highlight the unsung heroes and heroines who work in uncertain and sometimes unsafe settings to protect our communities and assist those who are under their supervision by providing programs, services, safety, and security. Staff will share their stories, and by doing so, will hopefully increase the collective understanding of what it is like to work in this field. At times, we will also speak with formerly incarcerated individuals who have successfully re-entered their communities. In today's episode, we speak to Rob Jeffries, Director for the Illinois Department of Corrections, about the transformative social justice initiatives his department has undertaken. Let's start by, if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners your name and the various roles that you have had in organizations in corrections.
So my name is Rob Jeffries, and I am currently the Director for Illinois Department of Corrections. I've been 26 years plus, 27 years in the business, ranging from, my entry-level job that started as a researcher, one of the lowest paying jobs and one of the most less respected jobs in the business. We are below the clerk in the office because we had no power. We were just asked to provide a bunch of information and told to skedaddle. And I come up through the ranks, had every position, programmatic side, warden, deputy wardens, programming with substance abuse, chief of staff for the state of Ohio. And let me back up. I've worked 24 plus years in the state of Ohio. I've had an opportunity to work with the federal government with NIC for about 3.5 years down in Washington, D.C. And then subsequent was, chief of staff for Ohio, Bureau of Research, warden, deputy warden. 1 year, 4 months, and 16 days ago, I was appointed the director here for the Illinois Department of Corrections.
Great. What brought you to work in corrections?
One of the things is a lot of folks grow up a little differently. And so I wanted to give back and be involved with counseling at-risk young adults because I come from a background, statistically speaking, I shouldn't be where I'm at. So I feel it was my purpose to invest in people. It takes some folks a while to figure out what their purpose in life is. And sometimes purpose can be confused with ambition or success. Simply put, I believe one's purpose is about fulfillment. I heard Steve Harvey state that your purpose or gift is the thing that you are good at with the least amount of effort. Your purpose is your gift, and your gift will make room for you. So try to be something that you're good at. Through the years, I believe my gift is investing in people and helping people to become better and to be the best them or help find themselves.
And what has prompted you to stay working? What's kept you working in this field?
Corrections is about opportunity and being prepared when those opportunities present themselves. Many times professionals, we go to school to become something very sound and proficient in a discipline or what have you, like an attorney or an accountant. But in corrections, this business, you can learn any different discipline any day. And it's all about applying yourself. So corrections or facility or prison is like a college campus, a small town. You will have the ability to learn a new profession without even having to pay tuition.
Right.
You can be involved with the business office and learn, accounting. You can get involved in cognitive behavior therapy and learn, counseling. You can even be part of the intake and watch how the nursing care, contract negotiations, anything. And then as you move along and as you grow in this business, you'll start getting involved in the politics and the law and economics of how corrections work. So the more you get involved, the more you'll learn and the more prepared you'll be when that opportunity presents itself.
So this year in particular has been a very challenging time in our country between the COVID-19 pandemic and social justice protests. These two major issues have a direct impact on criminal justice agencies and corrections in particular. Can you tell us how these two issues have been influencing criminal justice in the ways the public may not be aware of?
Wow, yes. Everybody can probably attest to these particular two words is focus and a sense of urgency. It just doesn't matter from what side of the aisle you are. You can be pro, anti, advocate, reformist, law abiding, whatever. COVID has exposed the urgent need for real criminal justice reform. I mean, we think about how to respond to COVID. We realize based on the CDC guidelines that are presented for us, and we create responsive objectives. It exposes the inequities of social justice. It exposes, based on the objectives and the guidelines for social distancing, it exposes how do we get people out? And then you start really looking at the crimes and why people were placed in prison. Then you look at the complexity of the sentencing laws and how that impacts certain people based on race. Then you look at how to find housing for when you start letting people out to create this social distancing. Then you look at the social and economic impact families have to endure as a result of being involved in the criminal justice system. I mean, it made us look at ourselves and it challenges us to do better because now we know better. And COVID has exposed us to that. The other thing with COVID is it made us slow down. It made us slow down and focus. It made us strategize our objectives to respond and to manage, to mitigate the spread. So those deliberate methodologies has to transcend into meaningful and purposeful discussions and actions about criminal justice reform and social justice. Because now you have all entities at the table. You have criminal justice, you have social justice, you have advocates, all at the table. And we all are looking at the same data. The data is becoming readily accessible to us. The data from COVID is the data from the social justice movement. I mean, it shows the impact of inequities. I mean, COVID has exposed a lot of this, and it has forced us to have real discussions that are meaningful, that are action-driven, to embrace the social justice protests and the movement going forward. I mean, it's necessary, if I can put it that way.
Well, in some regard, would you say that perhaps that might be a silver lining of COVID? I mean, as terrible as it is, it has laid bare some of these things that needed to be looked at, but for whatever reason, folks were uncomfortable looking at it. And so now it's a time when, okay, we're talking about people's lives now, the real health and safety. And part of the reason I did want to mention too, the social distancing, it's very difficult to implement that in a prison setting, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, they weren't built for social distancing. They were built for, to put as many people in a confined space as possible. That's what they're built for, confinement.
Right. And so, given your numbers, given your population, there's just too many people together in one area. You don't have any opportunity to spread out. Right. Right.
There's two types of designs that shows the outcome of COVID. You have the celled environments, and then you have the dorm settings. And in response to COVID, you see that there's some starking differences at how that virus spreads, and it impacts a dorm setting beyond capacity of how you can respond to it. And everybody can attest to that. I mean, it hits a dorm setting, and before you know it, it's throughout the whole facility.
Has Illinois released prisoners as a result of COVID? Has there been any process by which inmates have been released earlier than their sentence?
I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, we have reduced our population by 18%. Okay. COVID started back in March, and we had our population roughly about 38,000. As of yesterday, our population was down below 31,000. And that's just been as a result of, a couple things. One, we streamlined our release process. That's what COVID did. It showed that we had too many, people involved in the release process. And so we were able to streamline that. We've had completely created a reentry division, a reentry division that made that continuum of placement into the community a whole lot easier. We can streamline and make one division. And in addition, we had a lot of help from the governor's office as well, too, because we had a couple of executive orders that stopped the intake from, I was one of the CDC's guidelines as to limit your intake from the counties. And so we were able to stop that intake process, and we stopped all transfers, and we were able to, just laser focus on our current population management. So we reduced our population significantly. I go back to.
Okay, sure.
So one of the other silver linings is in this response was our ability to get the population involved. But we got the population involved in the movement of social justice as much as we can. We engaged them. We communicated our objectives as we respond to COVID. We were very transparent on the numbers with them. And we kept them included in our state of affairs as it relates to the response. And we provided them opportunity to voice their social justice in the social justice movement. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but they were involved. It brought a sense of togetherness. That's unheard of when you talk about a correctional setting, but we all felt the whole need that we got to respond to COVID, and we had to respond to social justice together.
Did you have any concern on either your part, or I guess the concern of how staff would react to having inmates voice concerns or issues around the social justice reform piece of it?
That's why we created a committee, and we created the Social Justice Initiative Committee. That way we have buy-in from all levels, from the executive level all the way down to the line staff. And we presented the task at hand. And at that point, you allow them to take it and run with it. And then you get the offender population involved. And at this point, if you don't mind, I want to allow Warden Burley to talk about some of the initiatives that happen at the institutional level for the staff and for the inmate population as it relates to social justice reform. And he can even speak on our COVID response and how the offender was very involved in that response.
Sure. Warden Burley, would you mind jumping in here and letting our listeners know what facility you are the warden of as well?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. John Burley, and I am the warden at Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center here in Illinois. Some of the things that we saw that were very impactful with both our staff and our population throughout this social justice reform was early on in this process, we decided to put together think tank groups that comprised of individuals from every department inside of our facility, all the way down to the line staff that work right there directly with the offenders on a daily basis, all the way to the medical and our dietary, our maintenance. We included every aspect of inside this facility in these think tank groups. And when given the task to listen to the population and see exactly what they were trying to say in regards to both social justice and the pandemic, those think tank groups were very, very influential in some of the projects that we started to do. One being a poster project that I had an officer come to me, and she was very forthcoming about some of the guys in our population that really wanted to take part in these protests throughout the state and the country. And they suggested being able to put together posters and paint posters that may be displayed at specific peaceful protests. So we talked with our PIO and asked her, Ms. Lindsay Hess, to see if there was something that we could do with that, and that kind of sparked our whole process into the social justice initiative. Going along with that, we introduced a mural project, and that mural project has now spawned off into multiple facilities that community-based investors are looking to actually be stakeholders in those actual events. And those, again, will be more generalized towards social justice and how it impacts our population inside IDOC. We partner with a lot of entities outside of Kewanee that has done a great job helping us hear the voice of the offenders. So we moved to several things that we are doing virtually, and we actually have the ability for our population to interact with those virtual means. And Two Roads e-Zine that we put together here and we're working on a second edition for, that was probably one of the most powerful things that was produced from the social justice incentive, because it allowed not only the offenders here at Kewanee to speak what their feelings are and what their thoughts are, but we opened it up across the state. And I think we received somewhere close to 125 entries for the actual first edition. And due to that reason, we're looking at trying to open that up and do a second edition with the entries that weren't used.
Would you mind telling our listeners what Two Roads is?
What it is it's a group of individuals here at Kewanee that are inspiring journalists that want to be able to help not only those that are already out and released in society trying to better themselves and actually make it in the real world, out in the hard, tough grind, but also those youth that might be going through the tough times, maybe going down the wrong path. So, and then again, those that are incarcerated currently, they want to be able to inspire them based on their life experiences, especially since they've been able to come here to Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center and see that through cognitive behavioral therapy, you can set yourself on the right path, but you have to open yourself up to it. And they utilize that eZine newsletter for that purpose.
So it's basically an offender newsletter, is that right?
Correct.
And I'm assuming it goes that folks in all different institutions have access to that in some way?
Yes, the Illinois Department of Corrections has a tablet-based program that we broadcast that across, and we also do a daily newsletter as well to each of the offenders that have access.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's a very powerful tool. Now, you mentioned some external groups that you've partnered with and are helping you. Are they part of the group that's providing some motivational speakers for your population?
Absolutely. The Safer Foundation has been primarily the one that has reached out to us and offered several people from their areas of expertise, essentially because they offer services that most people incarcerated don't realize exist once they actually get released to society. So part of that is a motivational piece, but also giving them an opportunity to connect with resources that will definitely help them succeed.
Great. Now, let me ask you, or Director Jeffries, when you started talking about letting the offenders do the posters to be part of the Black Lives Matter protests, the peaceful protests that were occurring, or did you have any pushback from either offenders or staff?
Honestly, there was very little pushback. The offenders, that is probably one of the most powerful ways they get to express themselves.
Right.
Through their artistic abilities. And there are a lot of individuals within our population that have some amazing talent when they're able to show it and display it.
What is the racial breakdown of the offender population in the department?
I had those numbers pulled. So our population is about 55% African American, about 32% white, and 13% Hispanic.
Okay. And how about your staff, the racial breakdown of your staff?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little bit skewed. So we have 83% white and 13% black and 4% Hispanic.
I think that's true for a lot of correctional systems. I think it's a challenge for people in your position and recruiters out there. I think there's a goal to try to have a more balance, to have the staff better reflect the population that they are overseeing, but that's not always easy from a recruitment standpoint, a retention standpoint. But given the breakdown for your staff, it sounds like you have great staff buy-in for all your initiatives in this area, and I think that's great. It really is. Yeah,
and a little bit of the geographical makeup of Illinois will shock a lot of people that it's a very rural state. I mean, outside of Chicago. I've learned very quickly that it's almost named two states.
Right.
You have Chicago, then you have the rest of Illinois.
Right.
And the rest of Illinois is like all Midwest, is very, open, rural, and what have you. So, offenders are not all housed in Chicago. So we have a lot of 60% of our population is from the Chicagoland that goes to the southern parts and everything. So this is very crucial that we keep folks involved, the staff and the offender population on these social justice reform. I mean, because we can no longer act as if we don't know that it's an issue when everything is right before us. Right. And as I spoke earlier, COVID has exposed that. So we set clear expectations, and we work through some training curriculum. We create policy reform where we can to equip staff with the necessary tools. I mean, we want to be able to provide that information for them as we move forward with this reform. And this reform has multiple layers. We started with criminal justice reform way back in December.
December of 2019, before the country was looking at that. What prompted you to start it?
Well, it was necessary. Just a little bit of background. I mean, the timing was perfect. We, as IDOC, is embarking on a journey, what we have coined as a journey of excellence. And we have developed a strategic plan for criminal justice reform. And like I said, it started back in December. It was all about, our efforts to change the culture and our population management strategies from a punitive to more of an incentivized, with emphasis on unit management. That's a new concept for us. The staff are taking it and running with it. We're doing a lot of classification reform. We got to get out of the philosophy of keeping people at a certain security level based on time and crime, and move it to more behavior and programming participation, and throw in some case management as you do the risk and needs assessment to prepare people for reentry. That's our movement. So we were already in the mind frame about reform.
And with the social justice protests occurring around the country, did you have concerns that you may have some, disturbances or offenders acting out in some way if you didn't have kind of letting their voices be heard, if you didn't undertake that initiative? Or was that really not something on your mind because you were dealing with COVID, you had other emergencies?
Well, it's interesting because COVID had raised that concern. I mean, we were worried about locking people down for, a long periods of time. So in our response, like everybody else, we respond based on the FEMA incident command system. You come up with your daily objectives, your communication plan, you get those out daily and what have you. But as we come up with an issue at hand, we would strategize and come up with new objectives. And to be able to handle that, we created what we call a task force. We had a population management task force that streamlined the process to getting people out. Then we had a normacy task force that took in consideration about the welfare of individuals being locked down all day. And so we wanted to try to bring as much normalcy to the day-to-day operation, given that they were on quarantine, lockdown, or isolation for the population. But we wanted to be able to provide some sense of normalcy for the population, because think about just you and I, when we can't go out to the store because the corner shut down because of COVID, and now we have offenders locked in cells all day that they cannot get out and do yard or day room or phone access. So that's why I was in programming the mental health needs of our program, our mental health caseloads. And so the normacy team was able to take in consideration of the CDC guidelines based on the medical task force that we also had in each facility, and come up with safe ways to get people in small cohorts to give them some sense of, movement, whether to the rec yard, to the day room, to a program unit, or those facilities who had open layouts, putting them in small groups and getting them to the chow hall and what have you. So we understood that we could not lock folks down forever. That's just not that's just not right, period. We're talking about human beings. So that normacy task force was already ahead of this as it relates. And so, when social justice reform and protests and what have you, it was just another thing to consider, but I don't believe we were using that as a tool to try to prevent any type of arrest.
Okay.
But we wanted to give them a voice. Right.
To me, reviewing, it sounds that you were very proactive in that. As you know, if they feel like they're being heard, they're going to have a lot less problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you see any challenges or barriers you're implementing these initiatives?
I look at it like this. We set expectations, and as I mentioned before, we have been very transparent and through our strategic plan about, investing in the staff. I mean, we've redone our whole training academy. We've redone all of our policy to give clear expectations, and so it gives them guidance. And we communicate. And quite frankly, communication, you have to do that more than ever now. You cannot communicate enough to the staff or the population. And during that communication, you always have to do better as explaining the why. I mean, people need to know the why things are happening. And that keeps them engaged in the process. The barriers, I mean, they're small, but the rewards are so much better.
So I noticed you are undertaking doing anti-racism training for both staff and members of the population. Have you started that yet, or is that's part of your strategic plan?
So Shalith Hansbrough, my administrative assistant, she is part of the Social Justice Initiative. Okay. So she can talk about the initiatives and probably give you more background about the things that they're working through.
Okay, great.
Shalith?
Great. Good afternoon, Shalith. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Shalith Hansbrough, and as the director said, I'm his administrative assistant. And so I have been involved with the social justice initiatives along with Warden Burley and several other individuals that are from throughout our organization. And what's so very exciting about that is our committee is diverse. I mean, in terms of age, gender, race, culture. And so there are so many people that are bringing so many ideas to the table, and really excited about this place in time where we have an opportunity to work on these initiatives that are so very important to staff and to the offender population. And so you asked about the anti-racism training, and we do have a goal to provide anti-racism training to all staff and to the incarcerated population as well. We have started with some pilot training for cultural competence. And so we've had a couple of those trainings already, and they have been very, very good. They've really dealt with some real issues. These were trainings that were developed by staff along with some external stakeholders as well. Great. So we are working with external stakeholders to bring in additional training in addition to, we have staff that really have the abilities and the expertise that can assist with this as well. So we've been very excited to start this. I participated in one of those cultural competency trainings. And again, it was really an eye-opener in so many ways. And it was really an opportunity for staff to be able to just have an open discussion. And as the director said, communication is very, very key. So when you look at all of the initiatives that the Social Justice Committee has before us, there are over 20 initiatives that we are working on. That's industrious, but the director started us out. He's not really talking about what he allowed himself to be vulnerable with the population as well as with our staff. In terms of, he sat down and he was interviewed by the offender population right after the George Floyd incident happened. He allowed himself to speak with them and them ask specific questions of him. And so he started us off and he has set us on this path. Our trajectory is clear. We understand what our direction is, and we're excited about it because not only does it give our population a voice, but it gives us a voice as well. And so again, our committee is very diverse. It's so exciting for me to hear people of a different age group than I am to be able to bring forth so many different ideas and perspectives. And so if we have that on the staff side, just imagine what we have in the offender population as well. just because if we decided not to talk about it, well, guess what? They're watching it on TV. They're talking about it together. So let's give them a positive outlet. So we're looking at book clubs, and in addition to the anti-racism training, and the Two Roads has just been amazing. And so people out there are talking about it because we are showing it. We're being transparent. You see it on social media. We're showing and demonstrating what we're doing from the inside out. And we are helping people to maintain their relationships with their families. When you look at furloughs, if people are able to go to funeral furloughs or able to go to critical illness furloughs, many times they're unable to do that because they don't have the funds to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, we're working with our population to be able to make it accessible across the board. And if they have the security level to be able to do that, then we're allowing them to do that, helping them with their bonds with their families, days with dads, expanding those programs systemically along with the Mom and Me camps. So we're doing a lot. We are excited. It's hard work. We sit down and we really talk. Everybody doesn't agree all the time, but when we walk away from the table, we feel that we've been heard and that we're doing the right thing at the end of the day.
It's great. I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice, Shalith. It really is wonderful. And I believe Illinois is being a real leader and on the cutting edge in corrections in this country. And I'm happy to have an opportunity to showcase some of that here on our podcast, because you're doing some great work, and I will be excited to check in and see how things are going.
Please do, because we even have policies on racial disparity where we have committees throughout the state that are monitoring what's going on in the facilities in terms of assignments, in terms of jobs, in terms of their housing and discipline. And so each facility is also tasked with providing a quarterly report so that we can start to collect data and start to make changes as a result of what we're finding.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, the policy and the reports, because in all of these initiatives, I'm curious as to how you will measure success.
Data speaks for itself. You have to be able to identify what variables can be measured when you're bringing about change. It's easy to track the data, like from personnel data, program completion, grievance, population reduction, and recidivism, your restrictive housing. I mean, those are easy. The other methodology you can use is based on your initiatives, and you can measure any type of indicators of success, like based on the milestones, you've been able to accomplish something based on a timeline. Like if we say we want to provide unit management at every facility, you establish a timeline as to when the pilot starts and when that completion date is, and then you move on to the next facility. And so those are based on timelines. And so a lot of these initiatives are going to be based on timeline. We'll have some relatable data as it relates to some of our criminal justice reform initiatives, like making sure that our grievances are going down, making sure our staff assaults are down, making sure the ultimate one is making sure our recidivism number is decreased, making sure our population reductions are in place. But there's a whole lot of anecdotal data out there that you got to quantify to see if it measures up to what you're trying to achieve, what the outcome there is. And that's still some work in progress, but for the time being, we'll use the data and then we'll use the timelines for indicators for success. And we also have an advocate group, the John Howard Association, that does surveys for the population. In a lot of those surveys, one of our values is we're being very responsive, no matter who writes a report on what we do. So we learn from those surveys as to how we can adjust. And that's why we found out that communication is key. Just when you think you've communicated enough, you have not. Mm-hmm. Always find a way to communicate more.
Is there anything else about this initiative overall that you would like to highlight?
We have an adult advisory board. We're revamping that. Mm-hmm. We want to discuss real social and criminal justice reform that, I want folks on that advisory board that have a vested interest in the population and which way we go. I want people at the table who are going to ask the tough questions, and we're going to have tough questions. but we also want to be able to collaborate to come with the same, reach the same desire. We got advocate groups on there now, ex-offender, anything what a special population needs, those folks are going to be on the table. Those folks are going to really smack me in my mouth when I need to be smacked in the mouth.
Mm-hmm. You're a brave man, I can tell you that.
The way we're going to get better, I mean,
yeah,
is bringing about, the much needed conversation.
Right. Are you aware of any other correctional system that has undertaken this level of social justice reform within its system?
I hosted that Correctional Leadership Association on corrections and racism, and folks are working towards it. I led the committee in discussion about what folks are doing, but it was also more of a dialogue about the need, because now that everything is before us, it's crucial that we do something now. Mm-hmm. The timing could not be better. We no longer have the ability to just sit back and just wait this out. We all know in this business the need for real reform. Mm-hmm. And years of inequity, years of disparity, years of just flat out racism when it relates to this business. And I can speak on that because I'm from this business. Mm-hmm. And impacted, just like everybody else on a number of different levels about this business. So you take your personal experiences as an administrator and just think about the people in custody. Imagine how many times they've been impacted by this. So we have to do something. I mean, that's what we're here for. Mm-hmm.
Well, like I said, I'm so excited to see how these play out, and we'll hopefully have a chance to check back with you after. Switching gears to just your own personal experience, can you think of a crisis that you've had to address in your career that was unexpected?
Wow, Kathleen. So
there's a lot of crisis in corrections. So I don't know if there's an example that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in a lot of uncomfortable and tragic moments in my career in corrections, from, disturbances, escapes, deaths of staff, close friends, and, murders in the population. Each time you have to process it and hope to give guidance for those who are impacted. I mean, that's what we're in these roles for. You develop an automatic sense of empathy that you can relate how someone is feeling and try to bring a sense of calm to the storm. But I tell you this time was probably the hardest time in my entire adult career. When we start talking about social justice reform, and we watched George Floyd murder on May 25th, 2020. I mean, I was personally impacted. I was angry. I wanted to protest. I wanted to just be a Black man and air my grievances on society of how I've been unjustly treated throughout my years. I felt how I couldn't breathe from discrimination, how I couldn't breathe from being treated unfairly. How many times I've been, passed over for promotions, treated indifferently, and I had all that. I was angry. I mean, and I've shared that with a number of people and other colleagues of mine too. And what I found was, so were they. But it took two individuals that I will tell you that told me, okay, and that's Shalith, that's on the line with me, and Camille, who said we have to put something out to the staff and to the population. But it took a lot for me to get there. But once I got there, I got over my own feelings. I wanted to bring that sense of calmness and that sense of empathy to the population and to those impacted staff members too. Let's not forget that. Staff were caught in a pendulum between law enforcement and social justice, given the field that we're in. But right is right and wrong is wrong. So I felt that it was my duty to put forth a message to the field that was heartfelt of all the feelings that I had and where we're going to go as an agency together to address those issues.
So if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners, you put out a message to your staff shortly after George Floyd was murdered. And if you could just summarize or kind of mention what it is that you hit upon.
It happened on, May 25th. My 1-year anniversary was June 1st for being here in this agency. And so, that's supposed to be a happy time for you, but I didn't feel that way. It was like a sobering feeling because I was just caught up in the whole protest thing and watching day in and day out. I wanted to share that there is deep pain. I want the staff to understand that this is America, and we have to come with grips with this because too many people are losing their lives senselessly. It reminded us that our nation has come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. I just wanted to reiterate to them, be mindful of those folks who are impacted differently than what you are, but also have some empathy and be willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great message. And I applaud you. I think it was courageous to acknowledge it because so often, at least in my career, I don't know if you've seen it in your career, folks in corrections kind of stay silent on this.
Yeah.
We somehow don't see that that's our business, yet can see the racial disparity in our eyes anytime we walk through any institution.
Exactly.
And so I think it's exciting that we're now having conversations about it, that we're speaking to it, that corrections can have a seat at the table, can have a voice at the table, because it's one that should be listened to. Absolutely. And I think it's a real opportunity to make real change in our criminal justice system. As horrible as the incident is, I do try to look at silver linings. And one of the silver linings I've seen in the protests is the racial makeup of the protesters.
Yes.
That we've seen all different races, ages, walks of life. And I think there is hope that on certain things, our country may be able to come together at this time. I hope that does. I applaud you for speaking out to it, putting a voice to it, and not just silently sitting by and being like, well, that doesn't deal with corrections. We're just going to go on. Knowing that your incarcerated population was hurting from it, knowing that you had staff that were hurting from it, and knowing that you yourself had a huge impact on you. I think that's wonderful. I really do.
Thank you.
I really think the work that you're doing there in Illinois is going to be life-changing for your staff, for your incarcerated population. And I also think that you're going to have a lot of directors of corrections that are going to want to reach out and see what you're doing. And as you know, folks are willing to copy it, and you might be able to infiltrate this into a lot of systems, or at least something like it. And I think you've developed a wonderful model for people to be able to use. So congratulations to you and Shalith and Warden Burley, and for all of your staff who have been willing to step in, think about the hard situation, have those difficult conversations, and to move forward to improve the Illinois Department of Corrections and to improve, hopefully, the criminal justice system in Illinois and elsewhere in this country. So thank you.
Amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't say enough about this team that is here. I mean, they are all rock stars.
Yeah, it's great. It really is. It's wonderful when you have people around you like that. It really is. They make it so much easier, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Thank you for joining me today to listen to this podcast with Director Jeffries and his staff. I'm excited to hear the impact these initiatives have on the Illinois Department of Corrections.